Okay, let's start with a question that sounds like it's been ripped straight out of a sci-fi movie. Can we actually predict crime before it even happens? Like in Minority Report? Is that just fantasy?
Well, it turns out it's not science fiction at all. This right here is a map from a system called PredPol, short for predictive policing. It crunches historical crime data and uses AI to forecast where and when specific crimes are most likely to pop up. And believe it or not, police forces have been using this kind of tech for years to try and get ahead of the curve.
So that's what we're jumping into today, a closer look at the sociology of crime and deviance.
Because, before we can send in the AI or any other high-tech solutions, we've got to take a step back and wrestle with a much more basic question. What even is crime? And what makes something deviant in the first place?
That brings us right into our first section, where we're going to break down these core ideas.
So let's start with the big one, deviance. In sociology, deviance is pretty much just nonconformity. It's about breaking the unwritten rules, the social norms that most people in a society just kind of accept. It's not necessarily illegal. It's just, well, it's not what's expected of you.
So how does society keep us all following the rules? Through something called sanctions. These are basically the reactions we get from other people. They can be super informal, like a dirty look from a stranger. Or they can be very formal, like getting arrested. It's that whole system of push and pull that encourages us to stay in line.
And here's where we get to a really key distinction. Deviance and crime, they're not the same thing, though they do overlap. Deviance is breaking a social rule. Think about facing the back wall in a full elevator. It's just weird, right? But it's not illegal. Crime, on the other hand, is when you break a formal, written law, something the government can actually punish you for, like a robbery. So here's the bottom line. All crime is deviant, but not all deviance is a crime.
Which, of course, leads to the massive question that sociologists have been puzzling over for more than 100 years. If we have all these rules and norms and sanctions, why do people still break them?
And that question is our ticket into the really fascinating, and sometimes pretty weird, world of sociological theories of crime.
I mean, just look at the journey we've been on. Early theories, some of them a bit bizarre, tried to find the root of crime in a person's biology, literally in the shape of their skull. Today, we've gone from measuring heads to analyzing huge amounts of data, looking for social patterns instead of some kind of biological flaw. Now, one of the biggest theories in sociology comes from Robert Merton, and it's all about something he called strain. He argued that society gives us all these big goals, like the American dream of being rich and successful. But here's the catch. It doesn't give everyone the same legitimate ways to actually achieve that dream. And that creates a strain, a real pressure to get what you want, no matter how you have to do it.
Merton laid out 5 ways people respond to this pressure. Most of us are conformists. We want the goals and we follow the rules to get there. But then you have the innovators. They still want that success. They want the nice house and the fast car, but they see the normal path as being blocked. So they find a new, illegitimate path. And that's where crime can come in.
But then a whole other school of thought came along and asked a different question. What if deviance isn't about strain at all? What if it's just a label? This quote from Howard Becker just flips the whole idea on its head. He says no act is deviant on its own. It only becomes deviant when society's powerful groups decide to label it that way. And this is a perfect example of what he meant. Think about it. A college kid experimenting with drugs? That might get labeled as youthful experimentation. Just a phase. But the exact same act, done by a kid from a poor inner-city neighborhood, that's often labeled delinquency, a sign of a criminal in the making. The behavior is identical. The label and the consequences are a world apart.
So if deviance is a product of social strain or social labels, how does society try to get a handle on it? This leads us to our next section, theories of control.
One really popular approach is what's known as environmental criminology. The goal here isn't to fix the offender. It's to change the environment to make committing a crime harder in the first place. We're talking about stuff we see everywhere. More surveillance like CCTV, target hardening with better locks and alarms, and even zero-tolerance policing.
This neighborhood watch sign is a classic example. It's a low-tech form of community surveillance, right? It's a simple visual cue that says, hey, we're watching, so the opportunity for crime here is lower.
Now, this focus on prevention is really tied to a politically powerful perspective called right realism. This view doesn't see crime as the result of social problems. Instead, it sees crime as a rational choice made by people with low self-control. It tends to dismiss links between crime and things like poverty and instead calls for a tough-on-crime approach, more police, tougher courts, and longer prison sentences. And this way of thinking had huge consequences, contributing to a massive explosion in the prison populations in both the US and the UK.
But here's the thing. This entire conversation, what causes crime, how to stop it, it all depends on one crucial element, knowing how much crime is actually happening. And that, my friends, is where the whole story gets incredibly tricky.
So, if you just look at the official data, things look pretty good. This chart shows a huge drop in crime since the mid-90s in England and Wales, and we've seen similar trends in other countries too. So, problem solved, right? We're winning. Yeah, not so fast. Because it turns out that in the UK, a staggering 57% of crimes that people experience are never ever reported to the police. More than half. Just let that sink in.
And why not? Well, there are all kinds of reasons. A lot of people think the crime was too minor to bother with, or they figured the police couldn't do anything about it anyway. Some are afraid of what might happen if they report it, or they just believe the police wouldn't even be interested.
All of this unreported crime creates what experts call the dark figure of crime. It means the official stats, the numbers you hear on the news and see politicians arguing about, they're really just the tip of a much, much bigger iceberg.
And that leaves us with a really tough final question. If the data we're working with is so incomplete, if we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg, how can we ever be sure our theories about crime are right? How do we know if our policies are actually working? How can we ever truly know if we're winning the fight against crime at all?